Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is Junior Anziani, a forward-thinking IT professional and founder with a deep-rooted passion for technology and innovation. From his early days building PCs and helping his high school modernize its systems, Junior has always been drawn to solving problems through tech. Junior, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today.
I'm excited to have you here. I would love to have you start off by sharing more with our listeners about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so as you mentioned in the intro, my name is Junior Anziani. I'm the founder. I work in IT. But before work, I'm a father, a husband, and a puppy dad. So I have a small daughter that I love and enjoy spending time with as well. But during work, I help solve small businesses and medium businesses' IT problems and technology problems by bridging the gap between what the enterprise world has for the small businesses as well.
That's awesome. And I know from your bio that it sounds like you've always had an interest in IT. And so I'd be curious to hear what sparked that passion and what really got you started with it.
Yeah, from an early age, I've always been curious with technology and just how things work. My mother used to tell me that she didn't like buying me gifts because I'd take them apart the same day I got them just to figure out how they work. But she never mentioned if I could put them back together, which now I'm curious. I got to go back and ask. Curiosity's always been there, and as I grew up and started working on computers in school, my father used to challenge me to read some tech books and say, if you finish this book and take one of the exams at the end, you'll get, either $20 or you get something like that.
Mhm.
That always stuck with me. So you're talking about a 10-year-old going to trade shows, seeing motherboards and all these components to put things together and make them work. And then once it works, it's like, wow, I did that. And that just kept carrying on through school all the way up to where I am today.
That's awesome. And I think you mentioned something that's really important is just the importance of having curiosity as a business owner. And I love that you shared how just being curious is something that really prompted this whole career trajectory for you and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, and I'm still curious. Every day I'm trying to solve new problems and figure out how I can get better, at least by 1%.
Definitely. And so I would love to hear too if you have always been a business owner, if you previously worked for another employer, and if you did work for someone else previously, what that process was like of just going off on your own and starting your own company.
Yeah, so up until recently, I didn't even know I wanted to be a business owner. I've had a career working in IT almost forever. I started at Geek Squad back in the day, solving end user problems, fixing computers, iPhone screen, things like that. And then I went into a formal career where I was going into an office working 9 to 5 as a help desk technician. So in my mind, I was always work up the ranks and go all the way up to, becoming a CIO at a company somewhere.
Mhm.
But a few years ago, I decided there's a little bit more purpose than just working at a desk and solving these issues for big corporations. There was more to life than just the 9 to 5. And as I was curious with that and I tried to figure out what I wanted to do, a friend approached me and said that his sister needed some help at her law firm. And I'm like, yeah, cool. I don't really do this on the side. I have a full-time job. I don't want to add more to my plate. He's like, you should really just talk to her. And I'm like, all right, cool. So one thing led to another. I talked to her and I found out, small businesses really need help. And what's different between a small business and a big enterprise is every dollar matters to them. Sometimes when we're caught up in the corporate culture, we have a budget, we have to spend the money before it's done. Where at a small business, every penny counts and every little efficiency that you can add helps them grow and be competitive. So as I started to learn that, I'm like, wow, this could really be something I do. And then I started taking classes to be a real estate investor because why did I take the hint that I should do that? And as I was doing that, the coach told me, he's like, you're not going to be a real estate investor. I'm sorry you paid me all this money to come here and learn real estate, but you have to do your IT company. So then I started thinking about everything I learned in that class and how it translates to becoming a business owner. And that's when I first started formalizing, like, okay, I'm going to open up a business.
Yeah.
And then what steps it would take to get there, what steps it would take to become, profitable. What do I need to do to leave my 9 to 5? And as I put that all in place, it took about a year and a half for me to actually make the leap and leave from a 9 to 5 to opening up a business.
And I love that you shared that because a lot of our listeners are in that same spot that you were in, where they are having a business on the side that they're potentially doing on nights and weekends while they're working a full-time job. with the goal to leave that job and go full time with their business. And so, with that being said, I'd be curious to hear what you found worked for you with being able to build things up and eventually, a year and a half later, leave that job to go all in on your own.
Yeah, the biggest thing is networking and getting to know people was
Hmm.
huge. Um, I do always encourage staying at your job while you build out and get those war wounds, as we call them, where you'll make a lot of mistakes at the beginning, but they're not mistakes that would drown the company
Hmm.
because you still have some income coming in. But things that worked for me was meeting the right people, being very honest about what my job was and how I worked with my company. So essentially, people knew that I was starting up a business. We were a startup. We needed some time to ramp up. That honesty, I feel, goes a long way building trust with the customer,
Hmm.
especially because they're like, all right, they're not trying to sell me something that's not there. They're being, very honest, very upfront, which has worked for me. The first customer I had is still a customer to today. And every change that we've gone through, whether it was a pricing change, a structure change, they've endured it and they've been very happy to help us move forward with it. So building those strong relationships in the beginning and being very honest and upfront helped, and getting in the right rooms was huge for me.
Definitely. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the importance of networking and relationship building because really that can help you get from just a handful of clients to so many. It's like the people that you know can do so much.
Yes, yeah, the right rooms and the right people. I always, when I was working a 9 to 5 and I was in a corporate job, I was always like, there's these cool events that I know nothing about. But
Mhm.
I see people post them, and all of a sudden, now as a business owner, you know about all these events, all these galas, all these charity events that you can go to, golf tournaments. And I'm like, a couple of years ago, I knew nothing about this. I didn't
Mhm.
even know this world existed. And because of those networking events and those people, now they're all showing up at my door. So things I wanted are happening now, but it was intentional.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, that it's like it does take time for that ramp up to happen, which you alluded to by mentioning that it did take about a year and a half to get to the point where you felt like you could really fully step into being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and it's funny because what you first, or at least what I first thought, was my number to take the leap. Once we met that number, I'm like, this is not even close to it. I really need to make this leap. Like you start to iterate because in our minds we just make up this fantasy world and it's perfect and it's going to be great. And then when you get there, you see the truth and you're
Mhm.
like, okay, this is what I really need to do. But that helps you actually set up for what you really need. And then when you're going to make the jump, you're more confident than ever that it's going to work.
Definitely. And since starting your business a few years ago, how have things changed in it since then? Of course, I know you mentioned like pricing and services and things like that, but would love to hear how things are different in a better way now than they were when you originally started.
Yeah, I think the first thing everybody has to go through when starting a business is figuring out what their pricing model is and figuring out what their time is worth and what their services are worth, and then also figuring out who their client base is. At first, we start business off and we're just like anybody that wants this service. This could service everybody. They just need to want it, and it's you start to learn that your market is not everybody.
Hmm.
Your market is going to be the specific vertical you want to work with. You can niche down as well. You can niche in different markets if you'd like to. But understanding that and understanding that target market is huge. So that changed a lot. Before it was just anybody that would listen, you tell them that we had these amazing IT services and we try to get business from them. Now we've really honed in on what we want to do and who we want to work with. So that helps get more qualified leads in the door. Understanding overhead changes. So, from working in a basement or in a home office, all the way to now we have our office in our town, we have space, we've hired employees. So those are all overhead costs that you don't have when you first start. But as you start to iterate the business, you start to add this and you have to put it into your pricing model. So those will shift. Understanding the correct pricing model, we did not know. I used to do time and materials when I first started, and we moved away from time and materials to more of a ARR or MRR type of business, which is monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue,
Hmm.
so that we could plan better around it and we can make more strategic decisions as we build. So all that stuff has changed from day one, and it continues to change as we get to different levels in the business.
Definitely. And that's a really good point that you mentioned there to leave that with is that like things are always going to change. And that's something that you want to be mindful of is not staying stagnant. But in order to continue to grow, you have to be able to adapt and change and shift as things around you change and whatnot.
Yes, yes, you definitely have to be able to change. And I think the biggest change for me was building the business outside of myself.
Hmm.
Not a business focused just on me. It's an actual business. I didn't want to create another job. I wanted to create, a company.
hmm And that's one thing I'd love to talk about now is you'd mentioned being able to hire employees and how that changed how you do business and your business model. And so I think that's another thing a lot of our audience is kind of at the point of where they're like, I might need to bring someone in to help me, but I don't know if I'm able to like accommodate that right now. I'd love to hear, Junior, from you, kind of your thought process that kind of made you realize it was time to bring in some more help.
Yeah, whenever you're working 80, 90 hours to 100 hours a week, you kind of need to bring in some help. Uh, it's always hard. That's the hardest decision. I think people is the biggest challenge that business owners face, finding the right people for the right roles at the right time.
Mhm.
Again, everything is learning and iteration. So I've made a couple hires in the past that I wasn't happy with, but I learned about understanding your management style and who you mesh with. There's a lot of assessments you could use out there, but ideally you gotta clarify what the role is. And I think that
Yeah.
was the hardest challenge at first. It's like, I just need someone to come help me. And it's like, where? There's a million places they can be, but no one's going to be you as a business owner, right? So once you clarify what those roles are and what hats you're wearing, and you decide, here's where I'm going to first hire. In my journey, I did a few things different, right? So at first, accounting was very hard for me. I didn't feel like I needed to hire someone for accounting, but I needed to offset it from me. So we found a company that did our books, that did our accounting for us and helped us. So that was one way that we got one of those hats taken off. Then social media became a little bit more complicated, the posting, being a little bit more creative around it. Another hat that we took off. So you could outsource it to companies, but now as we continue to grow, we need people internally that have our values, that understand what we're doing, and that take off roles from me. And as we delegate those roles, it opens up time to build the business more and to explore more avenues of business as well.
Absolutely. And that's a great distinction, the difference between hiring like an external contractor or external agency versus hiring in-house for your specific services. So it sounds like you hired things that you just don't have strengths in or don't really have the time or knowledge on externally, but then internally really focused on hiring for your business specifically. Would you say that's right?
100%. But one
Yeah.
thing I will add as a caveat there is we don't, at least I don't hire with and just forget about it.
hmm
Like I hire, but I'm still involved. Like I don't expect my, accounting firm to know everything that's IT related. You know, I expect myself to know that and have enough knowledge that I can challenge them if there's something not going the way that we want it to be. And same thing with social media. It's like trends are changing, things are changing. I like this, but how do we move so that we get more engagement? We do, this with our marketing campaigns. So it's you hire, but you don't forget about it because I think that's something that we like to do is we'll hire and we think that problem's gone away. If we don't continue to nurture that, then it's not going to give you the results you want.
Absolutely. And that is one thing I'd love to cover too, is just, I guess, the balance of, like you said, being involved still in the day to day and on top of stuff, but also being able to take a step back and have more of that CEO perspective or role. And so I'm curious to hear how you balance the two of like not being so caught up in the weeds, but still making sure you have your hands in certain things.
Yeah, that's still something that I struggle with as a tech aficionado. I like to get into the tech, and I see a problem and I want to solve it. But you always have to remember that there's more valuable things to do with your time.
hmm
You understand that you're building a company, you're pushing vision, you're building clientele, you're building trust, so that when you're spending time on those other tasks that could be delegated out, you're not really giving the best of the business.
hmm
You want to use your time where it values the business the most and your clients the most, right? You don't, I always say you don't want to delegate, you don't want to do a $10 task that can be delegated. You want to be able to delegate that and then do those $150 tasks that only you can do, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to phrase that. And say that there is a small business owner who's listening to this episode and they're like, I might actually need to work with an IT professional for my business. What are some signs that it is the right time for a company to hire someone like yourself and invest in those services?
Yeah, so there's always a good time to hire an IT company, especially with your growth plans and your employees. What I like to tell companies is as soon as you start growing outside of yourself, you really want to have that infrastructure in mind. And when
hmm
you're thinking about how is the internet going to work, I need a printer that 5 people can print to. When you start to think about problems like that and you find yourself Googling it or asking AI for advice, you probably want to bring in a professional. There's levels of professionals that you could bring in at a smaller firm, 1 to 5 people. You might bring in a smaller group. And then as you get bigger, you'll bring in more companies that could help you build and actually use the tech as a launch pad for your growth as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm curious if you see more businesses that you support like having remote staff, or if like there's more of like the, I guess, in-person businesses that you support, or maybe it's like an equal balance. I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, the businesses we support are actually kind of balanced out. We have some businesses that are doing everything onshore, so everybody's here or within their offices. We have some businesses that have remote staff as well. And what we like to tell our businesses is whether they're remote or they're here, you treat the employees the same way, especially with the tech. You make sure that you have the tools in place. You always trust but verify. You have your checks and balances in place because just because they're offshore doesn't mean that you treat the security risk any different than if someone was in your office as well.
Definitely. And what are some things that small businesses should be mindful of when it comes to security and things that they should do to protect themselves?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing I always like to share with small businesses is they think it'll never happen to them, so they're blindsided by security incidents. And the reality is, security folks aren't really out here, or hackers aren't really out here looking for individuals. They're not looking for a junior. They're not looking for Ashley. They're looking for any vulnerability that they can exploit.
Mhm.
And that means they're just looking for anybody blindly. And once they find it, they go in there and exploit it. So don't ever think they're targeting you personally, be it there is some hackers that will do that, but the majority of them aren't targeting you personally. They're targeting whatever's available to them so they can make money. It's a money business for them. So just because you're small and you're a mom and pop shop doesn't mean you shouldn't think about security. When you bring in an internet connection, don't think that your provider is providing that security. That's on you as the business owner to understand the risk and how to mitigate those risks. And mitigation could be accepting the risk, but once you've accepted it, you know that whatever happens, you have a contingency plan with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like in terms of like phishing attempts and hacking that people should be aware of, they're only getting more sophisticated. And I feel like I'm pretty mindful and aware of things like that, but I almost caught myself falling for one that was an RFP because it came from a trusted source. And so I'm like, oh dang, they're getting like even more clever. And so I'd love to hear your advice about how small business owners can be mindful of that and make sure that it's not a gut reaction, them clicking into the email, but more so what they can do to vet if something is real or if it's a scam.
Yeah, the first thing is always if you're not expecting that email, then you probably aren't getting free money, right?
Hmm.
Also verify with the person, like you said, it was a trusted source. I'd usually call them up, hey, I wasn't expecting this. Are you sure that was you?
Hmm.
And then they'll tell you yes or no. With AI, this is accelerating. You're getting emails that look exactly like the person. You're getting phishing attacks that are happening. Having training is crucial. We do training for all of our clients monthly. They'll just randomly get an email, and the training again is so advanced that we had someone fail recently because there was like a UPS invoice, and they were
Hmm.
expecting UPS invoices, but because they didn't catch on a few little key details in there, they clicked the link, which again, because it's training, it brought them to a training module. So that keeps them on their toes now, and they're more hyper aware of what's going on. So don't just think, oh, it won't happen to me. More of let's get proactive. Let's get some training around it. Let's make sure that we're expecting that. We all get excited, and hackers know this. That's they use fear and excitement to try to get to you. So
Hmm.
let's put emotions aside and figure out if that's actually meant for us and if it came from who we think it's coming from.
Yeah, and that's key what you mentioned there about just the education piece and staying on top of things. Like similar to what you mentioned earlier about marketing and how it's important to stay on top of those trends. Just the same for IT and cybersecurity of knowing what's shifting, what's evolving throughout time, so you can be aware and prepared for things like that.
Yes, of course. And I was just like vehicles, maintenance is key. Make sure
Hmm.
you're maintaining your infrastructure. A lot of people do set and forget. They'll buy something, somebody will come and do it. And then 3 years later, they're like, yeah, nobody's touched that, but it's a critical piece of the business. So make
Yes.
sure that you have the right maintenance in place, just like your car, where you change your oil every 10,000 miles or 3,000 miles. You do that and you don't expect the engine to blow, right? But if you don't change your oil and your motor blows, then you're like, oh, there was a cause to that. So it's the same thing with your infrastructure. Make sure you're maintaining it and upkeeping it as recommended. And then once you're doing that, things should work well for you.
Definitely. And for anyone who's listening to this episode who is interested in pursuing a career in IT themselves, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, so IT is such a great field. I love it. I consider it like one of the trades, to be completely honest. If you're thinking about pursuing it, please do. Join whatever groups you can to learn about IT, take some certifications, even entry level jobs. Like I said, I started at Geek Squad. So where you're learning about how to deal with individuals and technology, please go after that. And then once you know that you want to pursue the career, understand what it is that you want to do inside IT. There's probably 1,000 roles within IT itself. You could be a dev, you could do DevOps, you could be help desk, you could do systems administration, network engineering. There's so much that you could do within it that once you know kind of what you want to do there, focus on that and hyper focus on it and become an expert. Once you become an expert, you're going to become invaluable. And I always tell people, I never understood this when I was young, but time is of the essence. So the more time you spend on it, the more experience you get, the more valuable you become.
Definitely. And where do you see IT changing in the next year? If you see anything new developing or any trends that might be coming out?
I think IT is going to become even more important than it is today. If you look at the acceleration of AI, a lot of people like to say it's replacing jobs. And in my mind, it's going to create so many more jobs, especially for individuals. It's going to take away some other jobs. I'm not going to, sugarcoat it, but it's going to create so many jobs and so many opportunities for the young people and people who actually take a liking into it and understand the technology. There's a cool saying out there. I don't know who said it, so I won't quote them, but it's more AI is not going to take your job. Someone who knows AI will take your job.
Yeah.
So all those opportunities are going to come, but if we understand what AI is, we understand there's going to be so many data centers that come up, right? So in a
Mhm.
data center, you have network engineers, you have systems administrators, you have help desk people, you have so many jobs there that there's going to be a shortage in IT professionals that are going to be able to do the work. And there's just something to be said about physically going on-prem and having hands to do work. That's going to be missing.
Yeah.
So as you learn more about that, as you have to cable stuff, as you have to build servers, you have to think about power, cooling, all that cool stuff that goes into data centers and AI. So many more jobs are going to be created. Cybersecurity is going to become even more critical than it is today,
Mhm.
because as these get a lot more mature models to do phishing and do attacks, you're going to need people who can counter that on the good guy side, right?
Yeah.
So those jobs are going to become a lot more prevalent. I think the IT industry in general is in a really good place, and you're going to see jobs shift a little bit, but there's going to be a shortage of the jobs that we're going to need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also saw that quote that you'd mentioned, and I thought it was such a good reminder. And it also kind of reminded me too of like when the internet came out. Like the internet didn't necessarily replace people's jobs, it just completely changed how we did our jobs and
Yes.
opened up new opportunities. So I like that you had mentioned that same vein as well in terms of AI.
Yeah, I love AI. I think the technology is amazing. It's going to accelerate a lot of stuff, but it's also going to create so many jobs and so many opportunities. So let's start learning it now. And when we say learn we got to be very cognizant, right? Like an accountant might use AI a different way than an IT person will use it, but they
Mhm.
both use it, right? You don't need to know how the engine works. You just need to know how to drive the car.
Definitely. And on that note, how do you personally use AI and where you see it being really strong for your business?
Well, yeah, so we use AI in almost every aspect of our business, from automated testing all the way through automated alerts. We use it within our cybersecurity tools as well to detect alerts before anybody else knows about them as well. Day to day, we use them to do our training for our customers. So we'll take videos, we'll do SOPs using AI tools as well. So like Loom is one of my favorite tools. If I'm going to teach somebody something, I'll record myself on Loom. I'll do the job that I'm going to do, and it'll create everything you need for SOPs. And the what I like to tell people about that is you take those SOPs that you just created by doing what you were going to do anyways, and now you can train your own AI on how those tasks are done. So you use AI to create the training to then train AI on how to do the task. So, but we do that religiously here, and we're always trying different AI models.
Mhm.
Whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude. I think a lot of people know about ChatGPT, and I think people know Gemini and Copilot because they're big. But
Mhm.
there's so many different ones out there that you could find the right ones for the right task. So we'll use a Claude for coding here. If we're
Mhm.
writing an app or something like that, I'd rather use that one. And then you always just jump back and forth between them. But AI is pretty much integrated into everything we do daily here at our company.
Yeah, I love the Loom example because I use it in the exact same way. And it makes me so happy at the end of the year when it's like, you saved X amount of hours not being in meetings. I'm like,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, it's amazing, and it's not just Loom. It's the one I use. There's the Scribe AI, but once you
Mhm.
start thinking about it in that sense, like I don't got to sit down and actually write this. It's going to be written for me.
Yeah,
Then you're starting to leverage the power of AI.
totally. And now a fun question for you. I always love to ask our guests what their favorite local businesses are to support. So I'm curious to hear what yours might be.
Yeah, so local businesses, I have a few of them. My accounting firm, I will always shout them out. They're really good friends of mine, and they do amazing work. So JBS out of Methuen, they're great there. Local automotive shop as well. They do cleanings. So it's Mega's Auto Spa. I love working with them as well. Our law firms, we love them. So Baez Law Group and Estrella Law Group, they're small businesses as well in Massachusetts that we support and support us in our business. And then retailer that I love and will always keep working with is Vicina Beauty Supply. They've really adopted technology and digital transformation in the last couple of years. So it's beautiful to see what's going on in their stores as well.
Awesome. Good shout outs. Junior, this has been such a good episode, and I've really enjoyed having you on the show to share everything that you're doing in your business. And I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to reach out.
Thank you for having us. You could always find us at Anziani TS on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. And you could always look me up on LinkedIn and all social media as well at Junior Anziani.
Perfect. And I'll include those places in the show notes so people can easily connect with you from there. But thank you again for coming on right here in Mass.
Thank you for having me.